Here we are with this Quasar stream. This is for Quasar Alchemy, and Quasar Alchemy is, if those of you who are new to what we're doing here at Quasar, is our division of education and research. And I want to go beyond just simply, hey, put the key light here, instructional thing, but more in terms of empowering you, the audience, on how to use whatever you have at your disposal to tell a story. So you don't have to rely on the big guns that all the big guys use or the big women use, but it's really about, again, at the heart of everything, storytelling. So our first guest is a master cinematographer, Q Tran. Welcome, Q. And we have gotten to know each other over the past couple months of quarantine, and it's been a pleasure, and I just wanted to share you with the world because I think you have a lot of wonderful things to say about the subject. So. Welcome.
That's how we kind of connected over baking, which is hilarious, and also a nice escape from being at home with two kids and just keeping your family fed, but also creating beautiful art in your bread and your baked goods, and sharing that with friends and family. So I think it was. When you say, like, we've been talking over the last couple months, I think it's important to note that we met initially through baking, which I think is really beautiful.
Yeah, it's funny because we have so many mutual connections in the industry that it could have been. It took baking to
it really
for that to happen. We're going to go into behind your perspective, behind the camera and making movies. So I want to start with personal motivation. What happened in your life and what convictions came out of that to become a filmmaker?
Yeah, it's, every time someone asks me this question, I wonder, do I go into the whole story of how I became a filmmaker, which is really intense, really, really involved, or do I cut to like the shorter answer, which is, life is too short, pursue your dreams. I think for this, a lot of people don't know, a lot of people do know, but I was there at 9/11, and that pretty much altered the course of my life and my career because I was living in an apartment building, which was the closest residential building to the North and South Towers. And at the time, I was working part-time as a photojournalist for newspapers in New York City, and also working a flexible work arrangement at Deloitte. Because being like you, Tim, being an Asian child of refugees, my parents were always pushing us to study medicine or become a doctor. Like my oldest sister's a doctor, my next older sister's a teacher. I was supposed to be like a business person, and that just went out the window when 9/11 happened. So that's kind of the long answer. My life was severely affected by 9/11, and I decided that life was too short, and I wanted to do something that I had always loved, which was the visual arts, because I was painting and drawing from a very early age. I loved art so much. My dad is actually a really amazing artist and musician, and we were allowed to play music. We all studied instruments growing up, and when I went to college, they did not let me major in art, and so
right.
Okay, cool. I'll like study business or something. But I took a lot of studio art classes on the side and had my fill there, but only decided to pursue that full time after those tragic events. And so I think with that said, I really have a unique perspective on why I became a filmmaker, in that I just realized like I wasn't 100% happy doing what I was in the business world, even though I was making really good money, and that kind of supported my art because I was working part-time. And at the time, I was shooting film. And so I would like take my paycheck, pay the rent,
Yeah.
the rest of the money to buy new lenses and to buy film. And
Yeah.
I spent like as much time as I could in the dark room. I used to process my own film and print on fiber. I was really building up a side business in photography in New York City, and then I started working on the sets of NYU grad films where my husband, my then boyfriend, now husband, was producing. So I got to like be on a set with Andrew Perec when I was just like, oh, what's that? What is that department doing? And I got so interested, and I was like, that's so cool. And I was a still photographer on those student films.
Right.
And so on a whim, I applied to film schools on the West Coast. I got into a couple schools, and I chose UCLA because it gave me some money. So you know, I didn't know anything. So that's how I really got into it.
Right. And you know, and I think that's really important to know, because so many people have different paths to get there, and we all have our own series of events that we kind of progress through to get to where we are, right? But I'm really curious, in a nutshell, you know, because for example, you know, there's a whole stills photography audience that's probably watching. You know, how do you transition from an artistic and a philosophical standpoint of still images and the practice of still images to expressing yourself, or what's the reason behind it? Why did you want to transition from that into the moving image to express a story or emotion or so on?
I think it was mostly the collaborative process. When I would go on assignment, it was very lonely. It was just me.
Yeah.
You know, with the still camera, and like I'm shooting, and it's just me. Like I'm eating lunch by myself, and like, you know, it's nice in that you get to go one-on-one with people, like your subjects that you're photographing, or if it's like more photojournalistic, you're not really interacting as much at the time, you know, if you're on a long lens. But if you're up close and personal on a wider lens, closer, which we can talk about later, because I really do feel like my still photography has informed my moving picture images,
right? Like
100%. And so I really wanted to be around people. I come from a very large family. I have 5 brothers and sisters, and so I never grew up lonely. Like I was always around people, always shared a bedroom, and never lived alone. So I think I just wanted that in my professional work as well, and that's why I chose to move into moving pictures.
Yeah, there's a strong communal aspect to it.
Yeah.
And versus, I mean, because I also came from stills world too. So, and that was what drew me also into it, is that you're a lone wolf sniper versus the leader of a small little army. But also I think what's really interesting as I'm listening to your discuss all this is, you know, when we all with these, what was the kind of emotional driving force behind all this? Was there a certain hunger to discuss stories that should be told, a sense of justice? There's a lot of different these kind of deeper motivations that come out of such a traumatic event, because that's what pushes us through all these different things, right? So I'm curious to know how that, because that's going to tie into what we discussed later.
Totally. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I was photographing the events of that day, on that Tuesday, I had several people reach out to me because they saw my photos published in different, you know, like the New York Times. And there was this one woman who reached out to me, and I had apparently photographed the last picture of her mother. And it was very emotional. She reached out to me. She's like, hey, I'd love to talk to you. That image of a woman in a wheelchair looking very distraught. It looks, because I was shooting Tri-X.
Yeah.
That's what was in my camera. I had, because I kind of specialized in black and white. So I had 3 rolls of Tri-X that I had just grabbed when I fled my building. Right. And one of the images is of this woman in a wheelchair, and she's covered in debris, and her head is in her hands. And when it got published, I got this I don't know if it was an email or phone call from a woman who was her daughter.
Wow. Yeah.
She said, "That's my mom. And I'd love to talk to you, take you out to lunch, and ask you if you remember photographing her and what she was feeling at the time."
Right.
And I had this long lunch with her, a couple hours, and the daughter sent me like a beautiful orchid afterwards, thanking me for my time. But I just was like, oh my gosh, like the impact that one of my photos could have on a family, on a person, was so profound that it like forever changed me. And I was like, and I asked myself, like, what can I do with this that can potentially reach a larger audience? And how can I choose, you know, I mean, not that I chose to photograph her, but what can I do to maybe like spread my work that can maybe impact people in a positive way?
Yeah, exactly.
And so since then, like I mean, besides like the jobs that we are just having to say yes to because we're young cinematographers, we don't have a lot of experience. We just have to say yes to get like to cut our teeth, right? Besides those jobs, now I think I'm at a point, luckily, where I can really seek out those stories that I feel matter and have an impact, or can have an impact, what I think could have an impact. So it's really that can really have an effect on you.
Right. Yeah. And because really it is about, you know, because what we're discussing is finding. It's not just trauma. It's finding something that we care about deeply, and it's these obsessions, it's these interests that drives how we make decisions, right? And with our hobbies and our time, right? And that ultimately then, well, as you and I know, but that ultimately drives the decisions of our personal style, right? That becomes our personal style, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And you know, kind of not to steer away, but to kind of guide the ship a little bit. Besides that, these more harrowing, kind of traumatic experiences, is there anything else outside of film? Because it's obviously we could just talk about films, but what other influences and interests have had equal impact on you in the way you make decisions and have interests as you're looking at stories and telling them?
So many things. I mean, even now, like my daughter coming in, like having a family, starting a family really changed the way I saw the world. I would say earlier on when I started gardening, I know it sounds weird, but I really feel that, and I understand why people garden, and there's something really zen about it, but also you witness so much destruction and chaos and hope and failure. I mean, everything. You go through all the feels when you're gardening.
In very slow time, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's like you learn patience too. You're like, okay, I want to harvest lettuce, but I have to go back 4 months if I'm going to plant from seed. Then I have to plant in like October, and it's a winter crop, so make sure it doesn't bolt. You know, like there's so much pre-pro, there's so much prep, and you really have to understand your crop. And it's funny, it's interesting. I think it comes full circle. You know, I think art imitates life, imitates art. I got into gardening because I shot this documentary over the course of like, I don't know, 6-7 years called American Revolutionary, story of Grace Lee Boggs, which had an incredibly profound effect on me.
Right.
One of my dear friends, Grace Lee, directed it, and we went to Detroit time and time again. And talking about format, we shot that on the DVX, and the HVX. I mean, you know, going back to like, you know, what format is, and is it about the camera? Is it about the person holding it? And that, while I was in Detroit, I met a bunch of activists, because the whole movie is about that. If you ever have a chance to watch it, I highly recommend it. And I met all these urban farmers and these kids, these like rappers, and they would have like these wildflower bombs, and they would throw them in these dilapidated lots, and then these beautiful wildflowers would grow, and I just loved the idea of that, just flowers growing against the landscape of these like torn down, run down buildings with broken glass. I just thought that was so powerful and so beautiful.
Wow.
And so I decided, like, okay, I'm going to become an urban farmer. So, and that was like way back 10 years ago. So I've been gardening since. And I love it so much. I do it whenever I can. And I implemented a drip irrigation system so that it wouldn't waste water. And, being in California, living in a drought state, it's just important to take care of the environment. So, like, I think that really has informed my cinematography as well. Because when you're on set and you have, a plethora of toys and options, well, let's talk about a bigger budget show, because you wouldn't have that on a smaller one. And let's say, you could either put the Arimax out there and take a little bit of time and set that up, or we can go right away because the actor's in it. I think you have to be flexible like that, and you have to make those decisions constantly. Like,
right, yeah.
What's best for the story? What is the actor doing? Or are we going to make our date? There's so many factors that go into it, but I think being able to, like, say, you know what, I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna cut my losses. I don't care if I've been pre-lighting already for a half hour. We gotta go, right? So you just have the same thing with gardening. Like, let's say your tomato plant has like bottom rot, and you just have to pull the whole plant out and just start over and amend the soil and let it rest and lay fallow. And it's the same thing. I think it's just taught me so much about patience and not being afraid to cut your losses.